Have one observation and one quick question. Thank you again for your forbearance today. My experience with this system question goes back to the 90s, and as a CEO, I've watched this for the last 20 years or so of my career, that with the explosive nature of the capability in the IT area, you get what you pay for, but at the same time, you can do a lot more than people think they can do with the existing. And let me just give you an example. I don't buy for a minute that we have not spent the money or didn't have the opportunity to spend the money inside the federal government to have world-class control systems. I'm sorry, but I'll give you one example. State Department, and this is not a partisan comment because this goes back through 3 presidencies. But if you look at the year 2000, we were spending about $20 billion a year on State Department all in. That includes USAID, everything. The last few years we're spending 54. Now, a lot of that increase happened during the Bush administration. So this is not a partisan comment about the current administration. You can't convince me that inside $54 billion, that organization couldn't have the absolute best world-class IT systems available. It's not a priority. And that's a question of management throughout, across several presidencies. That's just an observation. Secondly, I'd like to get your estimate right now, what you think our net assets are in the federal government, just ballpark. I know they're not auditable. What do you think the net assets are, all in?
I think on the financial statements, it's about, was it about 3 trillion?
Well, the net deficit is 20.
Not the deficit, the assets. Yeah. Yeah, but it's 3 trillion, 3.2 trillion.
3 trillion.
Right.
And our net liabilities, the future, if you were to take just the 30-year amortization of our future unfunded liabilities, what would that ballpark number be? I know Senator Johnson has done a good bit of work with, I think, CBO.
Yeah, right.
Maybe even GAO has got some estimates.
Right. Well, the financial statements show, 21 trillion. I mean, we have many more liabilities than assets.
No, I understand, but
right.
I'm a little confused because if you just look at the Social Security and Medicare liabilities over 30 years, they're much bigger than $21 trillion.
Yeah, there's a separate statement of social insurance in the financial statements. The amounts for Social Security and Medicare are not considered liabilities because the Congress can change those processes. But if you add everything, that's why we have the statement of social, sustainability over time that shows that basically, you have a huge gap, fiscal gap. Our simulations show that if you wanted to hold, this is the best way I know how to explain the magnitude of this issue. If you wanted to hold debt held by the public as a percent of gross domestic product at 74%, which it is now, which is much higher than the World War II, post-World War II.
Yeah, the problem is what's held by the government is growing as faster than what's held by the public. And so I would argue that that's kind of a moot point. I mean, that's a side conversation.
Well, no, but that's debt held, the intergovernmental trust funds are going down, intergovernmental holdings, because we're spending the money out of the Social Security Trust Fund to keep it going. But if you wanted to just hold that, and stay at the debt held by the public that we are right now, you'd have to increase revenues by 35% on average every year for the next 75 years, or cut expenses by 26% under the current thing.
But this is my, and I'll just submit this. I think the characterization that 3 trillion in assets and 21 trillion in liabilities is not the full picture, based on what you just said, but I don't know whether the number's 100. I've seen numbers over 100 trillion, $125 trillion in terms of future unfunded liabilities. I don't think many people would argue with that directionally being correct.
Right.
I would then argue that the assets are much bigger than $3 trillion. If you look at what the United States government actually owns, lands, resources, all of that. And I've never seen an estimate of what that could be. And honestly, I think one of the things that's missing here is we talk about this from a cash accounting point of view and an income statement point of view, and not a balance sheet perspective in terms of dealing with debt. Debt to me has always been a balance sheet issue. You fund it and service it through your income statement, but you actually deal with it on a balance sheet. So this goes back to today's whole hearing, and I thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and I just think we've got to get a picture of this. So I would encourage us all to have a much more rigorous understanding of what our net assets are and what our pick a year, 30-year summary of total liabilities are, so we can actually see whether we're insolvent or not. I mean, if it's 3 and 21, if that were the real, which I don't think either one of those are right, It just highlights how serious this problem is.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the total set of financial statements in the audit, I mean, those are just the accrual-based balance sheet. That's why we added the statement of sustainability over
Right.
time. There you get a clear picture that things aren't sustainable over a period of time, and what the magnitude of the fiscal gap is and the structural imbalance between revenues and expenditures.
So if I were to bring you a public corporation that had assets of $3 trillion and liabilities of 21, if those numbers were correct, which we've already agreed they're not, but if they were, and you got an annual loss of revenue on your, or income, profit on your income statement of, let's just take today's number, $450 billion. And we know Senator is right that these numbers are going up dramatically projected. The CBO projects that we'll add another $9 to $10 trillion to the federal debt over the next 10 years. Would you argue that that's in a crisis situation?
Yes,
I mean,
yes, I've said it's unsustainable.
know.
When a fiscal path is unsustainable, and the sooner you take action, the better in terms of allowing people to adjust over time and adjustments to the economy over time. I mean, I think this is a very serious problem. I've said that for a number of years, and it will get more serious as time passes.
So it's bigger than just the accounting issue, and I think you've called that out in this committee before, and I applaud you for doing that. One last thing, you were the first agency, I think, to really get a handle on redundant agencies. A few years ago, you put this great report out. Senator Coburn took it and went to work on it, and I haven't heard a lot of updates on that. But I remember the number being as high as somewhere between $300 and $400 billion of redundant agencies. Do you have has your agency, has the GAO had an update on that in the last year or two?
Yes, we've had annual updates, and we're coming out next week with our sixth report.
Okay.
That'll be out next week.
So what's the answer?
The answer is, so far, in enactment of our recommendations, and our last update was about $100 billion that's been saved so far.
So
there will be saved. So, but there's more on the table.
No, I know. That's the
Yeah,
question
right.
I'm asking. So
Yeah.
good on you and good on the federal government taking
Right.
$100 billion out.
Right,
What's remaining?
Well, there's tens of billions. I mean, it depends on what the Congress does. I mean, it's at a minimum additional $70 billion, and it could be more. Likely more.
Thank you.